The rain came down soft over Madison Avenue that afternoon. Garrett Mercer stood in front of the Vance Couture boutique. The shoulders of his red flannel shirt darkened. A small paper bag pressed against his chest. Inside the boutique, Naomi Vance turned from the mirror in a red silk dress and saw him. She crossed the floor and pushed the door open. "Get out of here," she said, pointing at his face. "You are dirtying my storefront. Security, get this man away from here." The guard came out fast, and, from the far end of the avenue, blue and red lights began to pulse. 5 black government SUVs rolled toward them through the rain. Naomi turned her head. Her smile froze. 6 months earlier, in a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of Brooklyn, that same man had been pouring 2 cups of coffee at 6 in the morning. One was for him. The other, half full and lightened with a generous splash of milk, was for Maddie, who at 7 years old, considered herself old enough to drink coffee, provided no one in her grandmother's family ever found out about it. She sat at the small kitchen table in pajamas printed with cartoon foxes, swinging her feet and humming a song from a movie Garrett had watched with her so many times he could recite the lyrics in his sleep. He stood behind her chair and gathered her hair into a ponytail with the patient hands of a man who had taught himself this skill the hard way, one tangled morning at a time. He checked her backpack. He signed the field trip permission slip the school had sent home and tucked it into the front pocket. Maddie pulled a folded piece of construction paper from a drawer and held it up to him with both hands. It was a drawing of their family. There were only 2 figures on the page, a tall stick figure with brown hair and a small one with a yellow ponytail, holding hands beside a crooked apple tree. Garrett looked at it for a long second, and the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. He folded the drawing carefully and slid it into the bill compartment of his wallet, where it pressed against an older photograph that had gone soft at the edges. Maddie had asked about that photograph once. Garrett had told her it was for another day. She had not asked again. He drove her to Riverdale Public Elementary in a gray sedan that was 10 years old and ran like a watch. He kissed her forehead at the curb and reminded the teacher, as he reminded the teacher every morning about the peanut allergy, the new EpiPen in the side pocket, the emergency number that went straight to his phone. The teacher smiled, the patient smile of a woman who knew this father by heart now. After drop-off, he drove across the bridge into Manhattan and parked behind the contracting company that paid him. The dispatcher looked up from his clipboard, saw Garrett's name, and made a small face. "Mercer," he said, "you are on Halcyon Tower this week. Vance Industries. They are picky over there. Do not make me take a phone call." Garrett nodded once. A co-worker pouring coffee snorted. "Quiet Mercer fixing the air conditioning for billionaires again," he said. Garrett did not turn around. He took his work order and walked out. In the front seat of his sedan, before he started the engine, he opened the glove compartment and slid his hand under a folded road map. Beneath it lay an old laminated identification card, the photograph on it, showing a man 10 years younger in a dark suit, the seal of a federal agency embossed in the corner. He looked at it for 2 seconds. Then he closed the compartment. That afternoon he picked Maddie up. "Daddy," she said in the car, "why do you never talk about your old job?" Garrett paused half a second. "Because the old job was loud," he said gently. "I like quiet better now." That night, after Maddie was asleep with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, he opened a battered laptop on the kitchen table. A single encrypted email waited in an inbox that did not officially exist. "They are still looking for you," the message read. "Be careful." He deleted it, closed the laptop, and sat in the dark for a long time. Halcyon Tower rose 40 stories above Midtown Manhattan, faced in black granite that drank the morning light and gave nothing back. It was the headquarters of Vance Industries, the 3rd largest privately held defense technology firm in the United States, and the building had been designed to look exactly that important. On the top floor, a private elevator opened, and Naomi Vance stepped out into the executive corridor. She was 34 years old and had inherited the company from her father 2 years earlier, 3 days after a stroke had taken him in his own study without warning. She wore a charcoal gray suit and black heels and she had her blonde hair pulled into a tight knot at the back of her head, the way she wore it when she did not want to be looked at as a woman first. The board had wanted to bring in an outside chief executive. She had stared the board down for 6 straight weeks, and the board had backed up. The conference room on the 40th floor was dominated by a wall display showing the architecture of Project Sentinel, a $2 billion digital infrastructure security system Vance Industries was bidding to deliver to the Department of Defense. The contract would either save the company or define how it failed. Trent Hollis, the chief operating officer, stood at the head of the table in a tailored Navy suit, walking the executive team through the timeline with the easy confidence of a man whose smile arrived a half-second before his words. He was 42, handsome in a careful way, and since the funeral he had been the one person Naomi allowed close enough to disagree with her. "Everything is on track," he said. "We are ahead of schedule on the Federal Review." She nodded. After the meeting, in her own office with the door closed, she scrolled through the previous week's network reports. A small line of data caught her eye, and she stopped scrolling. Unusual access traffic to the central servers. 3 in the morning, 4 nights running. She picked up the phone and called Trent. "Routine maintenance," he said, his voice warm through the receiver. "I signed off on the windows myself." She said all right, and closed the file. She did not know why a thread of unease stayed with her after she hung up. 40 floors below, in the basement maintenance corridors, where the air smelled like ozone and old concrete, Garrett Mercer walked his rounds with a flashlight clipped to his belt. He stopped outside the door of the secondary server room and watched the bank of LED status lights through the small reinforced window. The lights were blinking in a steady 3-2-3 pattern, which was normal. Underneath that pattern, every 11 seconds, one light pulsed half a beat out of rhythm. He stood there for almost a minute, then wrote the serial number into a small notebook he kept in his back pocket. 2 security guards passed him in the hallway, one of them laughing. "Look at that," the guard said. "Maintenance guy stares at a server like he is reading a poem." Garrett did not turn around. Upstairs, an assistant set a leather folder on Naomi's desk. "Friday's gala," the assistant said. "Madison Avenue. The federal liaisons will be there. You sign the preliminary agreement at 9. Naomi looked out the window at a city she had been raised to inherit, and she did not see the man in the basement at all. Saturday came in soft and gray. The second rain that week. Garrett took Maddie to a small stationery shop on Madison Avenue because she had been talking for a month about a hardcover sketchbook with thick, creamy paper, and her birthday was on Tuesday. She picked the one with the dark blue cover and the silver elastic band, and he paid for it in cash. And the woman behind the counter wrapped it in tissue paper. They walked out into the drizzle together, and he told Maddie to wait in the car at the meter 20 yards down the block while he stepped into the pharmacy on the corner for her allergy medicine. Maddie put on her headphones and opened her library book. On the way back, Garrett paused under the awning of the next storefront to let a couple with a stroller pass. The storefront was Vance Couture, glowing gold inside through the wet glass. He had not noticed the name. He was looking at the paper bag in his hand, making sure the tissue paper had not soaked through. Inside, Naomi was being fitted in the long red dress she would wear to the gala that night. She turned, caught the reflection of a man in a wet flannel shirt standing in front of her storefront, and something inside her, something tired and proud and unwilling to be tired, went hard. She did not stop to consider why. She crossed the boutique floor in her bare feet, pushed the door open, and pointed at him. "What are you doing standing there?" she said, loud enough that 2 people across the street stopped walking. "You are dirtying the front of my store. Security, get this man out of here right now." The security guard came out and put a hand on Garrett's shoulder and pushed him off the curb into the gutter. The paper bag tore on the edge of a parking meter. The new sketchbook fell out and landed open in a puddle, the dark blue cover going darker as the water soaked in. People stopped on the sidewalk and lifted their phones. Naomi stood in the doorway with her hands on her hips and the rain just beginning to spot the silk of her dress. "Men like you do not belong on this street," she said, her voice level and carrying. "Do you understand me?" Garrett did not answer her. He bent down in the gutter and picked up the sketchbook out of the puddle and wiped the cover with the cuff of his flannel sleeve. He looked at her, and his face was quiet, and there was no anger in it, and no shame in it. There was only a single sentence. "Lo, you do not know what you just did," he said. She gave a short, hard laugh. "I just put a homeless man off my doorstep," she said. "It is not complicated." He turned away, and at that exact moment, from the far end of the avenue, blue and red lights began to pulse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 black SUVs rolled toward them through the rain, the small flags on their hoods snapping wet in the wind. Naomi turned her head, and the smile that had been on her mouth froze. She thought the convoy was for her gala. She did not know who they were really there to find. 20 yards down the block, in the front seat of the gray sedan, Maddie pulled off her headphones because she had felt the weight of the rain change. She turned and saw her father standing in the gutter, soaked through, holding a torn paper bag and a wet sketchbook against his chest. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. She had grown used to watching her father stand quietly and absorb things. The SUV slid to a stop along the curb. Doors opened in unison. A tall man in his late 50s, dark suit, earpiece, stepped out of the lead vehicle and stood for a second in the rain, scanning the sidewalk. His name was Daniel Brooks, and he was a senior federal agent assigned to the protective detail for the gala that night. Naomi smoothed her dress, lifted her chin, and stepped forward with the practiced smile she used for federal liaisons. Brooks's eyes moved past her without slowing. He stopped on Garrett, who was already walking back toward his sedan. Brooks gave one small nod, almost too small to see. Garrett returned it without breaking stride. The whole exchange took less than a second. Naomi caught it. She frowned. Brooks turned back to her with a polite, distant smile. "Miss Vance," he said, "we are running the route check for tonight. Everything in order." She nodded, but her eyes kept going past his shoulder to the man in the wet flannel shirt, buckling his daughter into the front seat of an old gray car. That evening, the gala filled the ballroom of the Carlisle Hotel, with chandeliers and champagne, and the careful laughter of people who knew exactly how much each other was worth. Naomi signed the preliminary contract with the Defense Department liaison at a small side table, while photographers held their cameras lowered. Trent stood at her shoulder and lifted a glass to her, and she let herself smile, just for a moment. At 9:47, the chandeliers flickered. The security cameras went dark for 12 seconds. Brooks's hand went to his earpiece, and his shoulders changed shape. Trent leaned into the microphone on the stage and reassured the room that it was a minor electrical issue. The maintenance team was already on it. The hotel's in-house technicians arrived, but could not find the cause. They opened the system to the contracted vendor list, and the name that came up on weekend rotation was Mercer. Garrett. Garrett got the call at home in the middle of reading Maddie a story about a girl who befriended a fox. He looked at the phone for 2 seconds. Then he kissed Maddie on the forehead and walked her down the hall to the apartment of Mrs. Patel, the kind widow who had watched her since she was 3. He drove to the Carlisle in his maintenance uniform. He walked into the ballroom past the security ropes. Naomi was standing near the bar in her red dress and saw him before anyone else did. She froze. "You," she said. "What are you doing here?" He did not answer her. He walked straight to the main electrical panel, opened the cover, and read the diagnostic display for 30 seconds. Then he turned, not to Naomi, but to Brooks. "This was not a fault," he said quietly. "Someone just ran a remote intrusion test. They cut the cameras to see how long it took the system to react." Brooks's eyes narrowed. "You are sure?" Garrett pointed to 3 faint signal traces on the monitor. There. That is not voltage drift. That is a probe packet." The room around them had gone quiet without anyone calling for quiet. Naomi stared at the man she had thrown into a gutter that morning, and he was speaking a language only her most senior engineers understood. Trent stepped forward smoothly, his voice gentle and very firm. "This is a subcontracted maintenance worker," he said. "He has no clearance to be diagnosing our systems. I will get the in-house team on this." Garrett did not argue. He closed the panel cover. He nodded once to Brooks. Then he walked toward the door. Just before he reached it, he stopped and looked back at Naomi for exactly 1 second. He did not say anything. Naomi felt something cold move down the length of her spine. 2 days later, On Monday morning at 8, Naomi was in the back of her car heading uptown when her phone began to ring and would not stop. By the time she reached the lobby of Halcyon Tower, the central servers of Vance Industries had gone dark. Project Sentinel, every blueprint and protocol and federal handoff file, had been encrypted by an unknown payload. A ransom message glowed on every administrative screen in the building. $200 million, untraceable, within 48 hours, or the data would be sold to a third party. By the time she reached her own floor, the building was already bleeding contracts. She rode the elevator to the server floor without speaking. Her chief technology officer had 12 of the company's best engineers in the room, and every one of them was sweating. They could not isolate the source. Wherever the malware reached, the floor went down with it, and the screens went black one by one like lights failing in a city. Within an hour, the Defense Department was on a secure line. Brooks himself walked into the building at 9:15 and gave her the message without softening it. "Miss Vance," he said, "if you cannot restore this system within 48 hours and prove that Project Sentinel data has not been exfiltrated, the contract will be terminated. Worse, Vance Industries will be added to the list of unreliable defense contractors. That list does not have an exit." Trent appeared at her elbow with the right amount of strain in his face. He proposed engaging an offshore cybersecurity firm, a former partner of his, who could be in country by morning. Naomi hesitated. Brooks shook his head. "Any outside vendor on a federal contract system requires clearance review," he said. 3 days minimum. The senior engineer came back with another piece of news, his voice careful. "The malware is custom built," he said. "It was written for our architecture. Whoever made it knows our system from the inside." Naomi went to her office and closed the door. She opened her laptop and pulled the access logs for the previous 6 months. The signature on most of the late-night maintenance authorizations was hers. She had never signed any of them. Someone had been using her credentials, and they had been doing it for a long time. She remembered Trent's voice on the phone, warm and certain. Routine maintenance. "I signed off myself." She felt the floor of her office tilt, very slightly, under her chair. She sat very still. Then she picked up the phone and called Brooks. "I need someone outside the in-house team," she said. "Someone I can trust who is not part of this company." Brooks was quiet for a moment. "You have already met him," he said. "Saturday night. The Carlisle." She closed her eyes. "The maintenance worker," she said. "Are you joking?" Brooks did not laugh. "Miss Vance," he said, "there are things you do not understand, but if you want to save your company, call him. Do not ask me why. Just call." She hung up the phone slowly. She opened the bottom drawer of her desk and pulled out a small business card from the contracting firm. Garrett Mercer's mobile number was at the bottom in plain black type. She looked at it for a very long time before she finally pressed the call button. For the first time in her adult life, her pride had hit a wall she could not push over, and the wall had a name, and she had screamed at it on a wet sidewalk in the rain that morning. Garrett was boiling water for spaghetti when his phone rang. He listened to her without interrupting. When she finished, he said one sentence, 10 o'clock tonight. I will be there. He hung up. He drained the pasta, fed Maddie, and walked her down the hallway to Mrs. Patel's door. Maddie looked up at him with serious eyes. Where are you going, Daddy? She asked. He knelt down to her height. I have to go fix something very big, he said. When I come home, I will tell you about it. He kissed her on the forehead. At 10, he walked into the lobby of Halcyon Tower in his work uniform, with a small black backpack on his shoulder. Naomi was waiting by the security desk in a black suit, her hair pulled back, her face washed clean of any expression. She did not apologize for the boutique. She said only, "Follow me." In the server room, the in-house engineers were red-eyed and silent. Trent was already there, standing by the wall with his arms crossed, and his face when Garrett walked in was hard to read. Miss Vance, he said quietly, allowing a subcontracted maintenance worker to touch a Project Sentinel system is a violation of our top-tier security policy. Naomi did not look at him. She looked at Garrett. Can you do this? She asked. He did not answer. He sat down at the main console, took a small worn laptop out of his backpack, and connected to the diagnostic port. The Vance engineers folded their arms and watched him with the half-skeptical, half-contemptuous patience of professionals, waiting for an amateur to fail. For the first 10 minutes, he did not type. He read logs. His eyes moved down the screen at a speed the man next to him could not follow. Then he began to type. Not fast, but steady. Each command clean and exact. After 30 minutes, he spoke without looking up. "This is not external," he said. "The payload was planted from inside this network. Whoever installed it has top-tier admin access and has had it for at least 3 months. I need to see executive sign-off logs for the last 6 months." Trent stepped forward, his voice tight now. "That is classified data. You do not have authorization." Garrett did not look at him. He looked at Naomi. She hesitated for 2 seconds. Then she nodded at the IT director. "Open his access. Tier 3. Trent's hand closed into a fist behind his back. Brooks was standing in the corner of the room. He saw the fist close, and from that second on, his eyes did not leave Trent. Garrett worked through the night. By 4 in the morning, the malware was isolated. The Project Sentinel data was mirrored to an offline archive intact, and the immediate ransom threat was neutralized, but he had not yet identified the man who had planted it. "I need another 24 hours, he said, "and access to the personal sign-off logs of the executive team." Naomi signed the order on the spot. Trent objected loudly. "You are handing the keys to a stranger," he said. Naomi cut him off in a voice the room had not heard from her before. "He did in 8 hours what 12 of my engineers could not do," she said. "Be quiet, Trent." For the first time, Trent had no answer. When Garrett walked out of the building at sunrise, Brooks was waiting for him in the parking garage. They stood under a fluorescent lamp in the cold air, without speaking for a long time. "6 years, Brooks said finally. "You have not changed." Garrett looked out at the gray morning. "I have Maddie now," he said. "I have changed almost everything." Naomi did not go home. She sat in her office and drank her 4th cup of coffee, and when the sun came up over the East River, she called Brooks upstairs alone. "Agent Brooks," she said, "I need to know, who is Garrett Mercer?" Brooks set a thin file folder on her desk. "You have a right to ask," he said, "and I have authority to tell you part of it. Not all." The folder had 3 pages. The first page was a photograph of Garrett 10 years younger in a dark suit, standing in front of an American flag. The name on the line read, Mercer, Garrett A., former lead engineer, Critical Infrastructure Security, Department of Homeland Security, Special Unit C, IS-7. The second page was a project list. Every entry had been redacted in heavy black bars, except for one heading that remained legible, Project Sentinel. Original architecture, the date 2018. Naomi went still. The $2 billion contract her company was bidding on, the foundation of the firm's next decade, had been built on a security protocol Garrett Mercer himself had designed 6 years before. The third page contained one line, separated from federal service, the year 2022. Reason, personal. Current status, low. Tier protective placement. She looked up at Brooks. "Protective placement," she said. "What happened to him?" Brooks shook his head. "That is not a part you have a right to know yet," he said. She sat for a long time without speaking. She thought about the morning on Madison Avenue, the man in the wet flannel shirt, the words she had used. "Men like you." She picked up her phone. "Cancel everything today," she told her assistant. "I need to be alone." In a small kitchen on the edge of Brooklyn, Garrett poured cereal into a bowl and read his daughter the rest of a chapter while she chewed. Maddie set down her spoon and looked at him with the careful gaze she had inherited from him without anyone teaching it to her. "Daddy," she said, "are you sad about the lady in the red dress?" He looked up. "You saw," he said. She nodded. "She said you were dirtying her store, but you were not dirtying anything." He was quiet for a long time. "Sometimes, Maddie," he said, "people are afraid of things they do not understand. They turn the fear into anger. It is not your fault. It is not mine. They just have not learned how to see yet." She thought about that for almost a full minute. Then she nodded with great seriousness. "Then I will learn how to see right," she said. He smiled. It was the first real smile that had crossed his face in a week. That afternoon, A black Mercedes sedan turned slowly into the parking lot of Riverdale Public Elementary at the end of the school day. Naomi sat behind the wheel with the engine off and watched. She saw Garrett walk up to the front gate in his old jacket. She saw a small girl with a yellow ponytail come running across the playground at a full sprint and throw herself into his arms. She saw him lift her, swing her once, and set her gently back down. It was the most ordinary moment in the world, and Naomi could not look away from it. Garrett straightened up and saw the Mercedes through the chain-link fence. He saw Naomi behind the wheel. His face did not change. He buckled Maddie into the passenger seat, walked around the car, got in, and drove away. Naomi sat in her own car for almost half an hour after he was gone. She had prepared an apology, but sitting there, she understood for the first time who exactly she had insulted, and in front of which child, and the apology she had rehearsed was suddenly too small to leave her mouth. 2 days later, Garrett returned to Halcyon Tower with the rest of the evidence. He asked Naomi to convene an emergency meeting of the full executive board with Brooks present. 18 people sat around the long conference room table on the 40th floor. Trent took the chair to Naomi's right with an easy smile. Garrett stood at the head of the room in the same gray maintenance shirt. He turned on the wall display. "The malware that compromised Project Sentinel," he said, his voice steady, "was activated from inside this building. I have traced the IP address, the MAC address, and the session fingerprint of the installer. The account used to authorize the access was Miss Vance's executive credential, but the device that signed in was not hers." He brought up a log on the screen. Every head in the room read the bottom line at the same time. Device HOLL1 S_T_L A PTOP03. Location: Floor 38, Office of the Chief Operating Officer. Trent laughed, short and dismissive. "This is a joke," he said. "Anyone can spoof a MAC address. Miss Vance, this man is slandering me." Garrett did not look at Trent. He looked at Naomi. "There is one more thing," he said. He brought up a video clip. The corner of the 38th floor corridor. 3 in the morning, 6 weeks before. Trent stepping out of his own office with a small drive in his hand, walking to the secondary server room, plugging it in, typing for 11 seconds, pulling it out, walking back. 18 seconds total. "This camera," Garrett said quietly, "is on the redundant backup loop. Mr. Hollis erased the primary recording last Friday afternoon, but he forgot that the backup mirrors to an offline archive every Sunday at midnight. I pulled this clip directly from the archive that even our own administrators cannot reach without federal authorization." Trent shot up out of his chair so hard, the chair scraped backward. "Miss Vance," he said, "I do not know what this man is talking about. I will not sit here and be insulted any longer by a basement electrician." Naomi cut him off in a voice so cold the room straightened in its seats. "Sit down, Trent." He sat. Naomi turned back to Garrett. "Continue," she said. Garrett brought up the last piece of evidence, an offshore bank account in the name of a shell corporation, 4 wire transfers over 6 months, $12 million total. The signatory line read, T. Hollis. The room read the figure and went very still. Trent's color was draining out of his face. He tried one more time, his voice now shaking just under the surface. "This is fabricated," he said. "You cannot trust a man you literally just hired out of the basement." Garrett looked at him. He did not raise his voice. The room had to lean in to hear him. "I did not come up out of the basement," he said. "I am the man who wrote the protocol you were trying to sell." The room went absolutely silent. Trent's lips parted, but no sound came out. Naomi turned her head toward Garrett, and for the first time she saw him not through a uniform and not through her own assumptions, but as the man he actually was. Brooks rose from his chair and gave a small nod toward the door. 2 federal agents walked in, set a pair of cuffs on the table in front of Trent, and read him his charges. "Trent Hollis, you are under arrest for industrial espionage, violations of the National Security Act, and money laundering." Trent turned toward Naomi with his mouth open to say something. Naomi did not look at him. She was looking at the window. and her hands on the table had stopped trembling. After the room emptied, Naomi asked Garrett to stay. Brooks remained as well. The three of them sat in the long, silent conference room, with the city fading in the windows. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I need to know all of it. Why you left, why you were here in a maintenance uniform when you could have been anywhere." Brooks looked at Garrett. "Do you want to tell her?" he said. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once and pulled out the chair across from her. His voice was even and not dramatic. "6 years ago," he said, "I was the lead architect on the original Project Sentinel for the Department of Homeland Security. During final testing, I uncovered evidence that a senior cabinet-level official was selling our protocol to a hostile foreign government. I reported it. They did not believe me. 2 weeks later, my wife Sarah died in a car accident on a rural road in Virginia. The local police ruled it an accident. I knew it was not." Naomi did not breathe for a second. "Maddie," she said, very softly. Garrett went on. "Maddie was 3 years old," he said. "I had 2 choices: keep fighting and have her grow up with a target on her back, or stop fighting and keep her alive. I chose her. Brooks helped me step out of federal service quietly into a low-tier protective arrangement. They changed my employment record, but not my name. I took maintenance work because I could control the schedule and pick her up on time every afternoon. I lived quietly for almost 5 years, until the rotation that put me at Halcyon Tower. Brooks took over. We placed Garrett on that schedule," he said. "We had reason to believe the new Project Sentinel architecture had a leak inside Vance Industries from about 90 days ago. Garrett was the only living person who understood the original protocol deeply enough to find the rot. He was at Halcyon by design. The morning on Madison Avenue, however, was not designed. That was an accident, and it is the accident that forced you, Miss Vance, to look at yourself." Naomi lowered her head. For the first time in years, she had no ready answer. She asked very quietly, "The cabinet official from 6 years ago, has he been arrested?" Brooks said yes. "This morning, same network as Trent. Trent was the long arm of that man into the private sector. When Vance Industries won the new Project Sentinel bid, that man needed a person inside your company to close the circle. We have been waiting 6 years for the right opening, and Trent's greed gave it to us." Naomi looked at Garrett. "My father," she said. "Did he know about any of this?" Brooks was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Your father did not know about Trent specifically," he said, "but your father knew about Garrett. 3 weeks before he died, he asked our agency privately to make sure that any new Project Sentinel contract had outside oversight from someone he could trust completely. He did not trust the cleanliness of his own executive ranks anymore. He was right." Naomi turned her face slowly toward the window, so that neither of the men would see her eyes filling. The father she had quietly resented for years, for leaving her alone with this empire, had been protecting her from inside it until the very last week of his life. Garrett stood up to leave. "Mr. Mercer," she said. He turned at the door. She looked straight at him. "I am sorry," she said, "for that morning, and for everything I refused to see." Garrett gave one small nod. "You are seeing now," he said. "That is the part that matters." He walked out, and the door closed quietly behind him, and Naomi sat in the empty room until the lights came on. 3 months later, Project Sentinel was completed under joint oversight from the Department of Homeland Security. The contract signed at a quiet Pentagon ceremony with no photographers. Naomi declined her personal performance bonus on the deal and redirected the entire amount into a scholarship fund for the children of former federal civil servants. The board did not protest. The board, in fact, had stopped protesting most of what she did. Brooks formally offered Garrett a return to federal service. Garrett shook his head. "I already have a job," he said. "I am a father. I will consult for you on my own hours." They shook hands. On a Saturday afternoon at the end of summer, Naomi drove out to Riverside Park with a paper bag tucked carefully under her arm. Inside the bag was a new sketchbook, hardcover, thick cream paper, far better than the one that had ended up in a puddle. She found Garrett on a bench by the river, and Maddie a few yards away on the grass, drawing the slow brown shape of a tree with serious concentration. Naomi walked up uncertainly. Maddie looked up first. She studied Naomi's face for a second. "Oh," she said plainly, "you are the lady in the red dress." There was no anger in her voice, only mild curiosity. Naomi knelt down on the grass to be at the child's level and held out the sketchbook with both hands. "I came to apologize to you," she said, "and to your father. I was wrong. I am hoping you can forgive me." Maddie looked at the sketchbook for a long moment. Then she looked at her father. Garrett gave one small nod. Maddie took the sketchbook carefully and held it against her chest. "You have to promise," she said with great seriousness, "not to yell at people in the street anymore." Naomi laughed. A real laugh. The first one in months. "I promise," she said. Maddie ran off to keep drawing. Naomi sat down on the bench, leaving an honest space between herself and Garrett. They watched the child run in the grass without speaking for a while. "Thank you," Garrett said quietly, "for coming out here," Naomi answered. "I owe her, and I owe you." He shook his head. "You do not owe anyone anything," he said. "You only have to keep being the person you have become in the last 3 months." They sat there until the sun went down behind the Hudson and the river turned gold. Maddie came running back with a finished drawing and handed it solemnly to Naomi. There were 3 figures on the page. A tall stick figure with brown hair, a small one with a yellow ponytail, and, standing a little apart, a woman with long yellow hair. None of them were holding hands. They were simply standing together under the shape of a single tree. Naomi held the drawing carefully. Her eyes filled, and she could not say anything for a full minute. When the light was almost gone, Garrett lifted Maddie up onto his shoulders, and the 3 of them walked toward the parking lot. Naomi walked beside them, not too close and not too far. At the corner of the avenue, 3 black SUVs rolled by without lights or sirens. Brooks lifted one hand from the back seat as the lead car passed. Garrett gave one small nod. Brooks gave one back. The convoy moved on into the city. There are men in this country who do not need medals to be recognized. They only need a child to keep them alive. And sometimes, to be truly seen, they only need one person, in one moment, looking for the first time. Neither of them had been looking for anything that afternoon on Madison Avenue. But somewhere along the way, both of them had found it.